Howdy, howdy, everyone. Welcome to my review of the first episode of the new Netflix cold case, Who Unalived JonBenet Ramsey. Welcome, Wolfram. Thank you for doing the Modly Mod stuff. Welcome, Tammy Bogart. I hope you're having a great day. DK Cripple, nice to see you. Alice G. And Lady Tammy, Tanny D. Welcome, welcome. Oh, thank you, Tammy. So I was upset because I thought I had the perfect wig for a Daria look, and she's a little too red and smexy, if I'm being honest, for a Daria look. But Mr. Mo has said no more new wigs for right now until we figure out my office area, which is mean and I think is against the law, to be fair. So I did the work for you guys to make sure that this documentary was good. I will say this is only the first episode, and thank you, Megan Raiders, for joining us. Thank you. So what I will say in this first episode is that it opens up with, kind of that old school setting, the desk in a, obviously busy kind of cop area that has the tabloids on top of it. So it is at least one standard deviation down from the schlocky hokiness that you would get from Rescue 911 in the early 90s. Although I do have an unrelated rant for about 5 seconds on Rescue 911 and Unsolved Mysteries. Is it possible that they could have warned us that Sally and Joe running their toddler child to 911 or to the emergency room had a lazy eye? Because you go through this entire story with like these really interesting actors who only vaguely, and I mean vaguely as in the sense that they are still human and have sort of the same hair color, the people at the end of the story. And you're like, those are not, did the casting director see the people that they were trying to be? That is my only gripe about Rescue 911, because anything with Robert Stack on it is my personal, relax to TV. So the episode also, be prepared, everyone. I took 19 pages of notes. I am a compulsive and neurotic note taker, so I will try to kind of go through my notes with you guys and try to give you the full experience of what I felt when I was watching this versus, giving you the highlights. So welcome, Fox Raider. So the episode opens with kind of a desk with a lot of tabloids. You remember them. They used to have, Bat Boy goes to Harvard or Bat Boy and Lizard Girl get married. That kind of thing on it. And there are 3 episodes in this series, so this one does kind of end on a cliffhanger. Now, it is told in kind of a multi-narrator sort of style. So in my notes, it's going to say, like, we cut into this and we cut into that. Things are very interestingly interspersed. For people who are, wondering, should I give this documentary a look? I'll give you my pro right now in that from this first episode, I don't know what the producers want me to think or what their opinion is. They put enough varying opinions in there that, unlike other documentaries I've watched on the, JonBenet Ramsey case, it doesn't seem to be going in with an agenda, particularly on this first episode. So I'm going to get into my notes. Welcome to my compulsiveness. The episode does so like I said, and it kind of goes into showing clips of different media things and how this case literally captured the nation and the world. I believe this had to be the Madeline McCann, sorry. I know that's a big one. The Madeline McCann of the 90s. This was a case that opened up a lot of, debates about beauty pageants for children, the alleged guilt of the family. Does the media bear some responsibility for ginning up, criticism for the police? Do the police bear some responsibility for horrible investigative practices? Should the FBI have been brought in quicker because Boulder Police Station, could not deal with this, and they were running on a skeleton crew because it was Christmas? So there are a lot of things that the opening does bring up. It is fairly dramatic and tends to imply in the opening that this might be the break in the case that, we've waited for these many, many years. We do then open on to John Ramsey, the only surviving parent, as Patsy Ramsey passed away because of ovarian cancer. John looks noticeably older, which definitely he would, because there's time passed, but he does have a sort of hunched posture. He kind of always talks like this. He's leaning toward the camera. And he seems to, it appeared to me that the case has weighed on him, whether you believe that he's, the weight is guilt or the weight is the fact that he lost a second daughter, which they will bring up in this documentary. He's asked to go over the day. So this first episode is mainly kind of a timeline of the day. He talks about how the family was supposed to be up early that morning because they were going to go to Michigan to, have Christmas with his adult children from his first marriage. Now, this is the part that deviates a bit from what I've known from the case. Now, from what I know from the case is that Patsy called 911 without really consulting John when she found the ransom note, which we will read because what in the giblets was that? Now, John claims that he was up in the bathroom upstairs shaving, and he heard Patsy screaming, and all he kind of understood from this kind of hysterical screaming was that JonBenet was gone and there was a kidnapping, and he encouraged Patsy to call 911. After getting the ransom letter, now prior to like I said, this is a new thing for me. Many of you who have probably followed this case might have heard something different, but this was the first time that I'd heard that John kind of knew anything and Patsy didn't call 911 on her own. Now, John does clearly state in this that he told Patsy to call 911 and get things done. Thank you so much for being a member for 1 month, Kelly, of the Church of Mo. I appreciate it so much. So, he kind of states that, this was unbelievable, this was fantastical, but more in the sense that he never imagined that his life was going to have something like this in it. Not like this was comical, the ransom note was comical at this point. Now, the ransom note was comical, if you ask me. I will read it here in a little bit. But this kind of documentary at this point doesn't go deeply into what they think the motivations for the, ransom note was or anything like that. And then we go to Patsy Ramsey telling this in not that first infamous interview, but I believe a later interview where she talks about going downstairs, the bottom of the spiral staircase. It includes footage of the home taken when they were doing the investigation. And, she talks about, she just kind of read the first few lines, according to her, and then called 911. Which, if you had read the entire ransom note, you would realize that was totally against this kidnappers, thing. So I'll read that to you guys now. Alrighty, let me inbigonate. Dear Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. I mean, I guess if someone's kidnapped my child, I wouldn't care if they respected me. I'd be like, F off, where's my kid? I don't care if you respect me. You obviously don't because you stole my kid. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want to see her or want her to see 1997, you must follow our letter or our instructions to the letter. Sorry, apparently reading is a skill I need to work on. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 will be in $20 bills. Make sure you bring an adequate size attaché. Well, I mean, dear Lord, if he'd brought a duffel bag, that'd have been stupid, wouldn't it? When you go to the bank, when you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an early delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviations of my instructions will result in the immediate unaliving of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for a proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being head taken off. If we catch you talking to any stray dogs, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. If you scanned for you will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned we're familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of unaliving your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You're not the only fat cat around, so don't think that unaliving will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC. Well, it sounds like the ravings of Reddit, to be honest. Good night. So that's the comical ransom note. Now, it has been brought up again and again that this is a terribly long ransom note, that it tends to use movie-style cliches, that it tends to just kind of bloviate, and the amount of $118,000 was the bonus that John was going to receive from his company. I think they do something with computer magic. Y'all know I don't know computers, so he does something with computers and made a butt ton of money, okay? I mean, a butt ton in which, like, your Christmas bonus is $118,000. Now, this is where we start getting that jumping around part, because in between, Patsy kind of explaining that she just called, 911. She ran up to her daughter's room, didn't see her. And, she started that. We jump to a recording of John where he talks about every parent's greatest fear, like the minute you lose your kid in Walmart or something like that. You turn around and they're not there. And for a moment, your brain just starts making the most horrible, slideshow of every single thing that could be wrong. And 99 times out of 100, they're going to be hiding under that garment rack or in another aisle. Nothing's going to have happened. But deep in every parent's heart lives that fear that you are that 1%, or at least it does in my heart. Now, we cut then to So you're going to see a lot of this in the documentary. They cut to interview with Burke being young, and it looks like it's a forensic interview with a child counselor or a specially trained detective. John claims that while this is all happening, Burke is asleep. Burke was 9 years old at the time of the crime and did receive a police interview in 1998. And this is where we get that recording. And then it jumps back to Patsy talking about calling all her friends over for support, telling everyone, like, come on over, JonBenet is missing, I need help. Now, it has been conjectured that this was for a much more nefarious, sort of evil, twisty, Ramseys are totally guilty part, that they wanted the crime scene contaminated. They wanted multiple people in destroying evidence, and that's why they invited friends over. But the documentary basically puts it as a kind of neutral thing, that this was just something that Patsy did. Patsy wanted friends over. Now, I will say that the documentary does include things that are negative about the Ramseys, and we'll get into that. But it does show a sort of balanced take in this first episode. So then the documentary is going to go chronologically, but we're going to be introduced to a lot of different players through this kind of chronological tale. So according to the documentary, police were informed at around 6:08 a.m. and we're told that they were responding to a reported possible kidnapping. And the person who is giving us this information is Bob Whitson, the retired police detective from Boulder Police Department. He goes on to explain that this is a very rare case for the Boulder Police Department, and they had never been, in a kidnapping case like this or anything like that. Now, 2 detectives did respond to the location, and John then comes back in at this point to explain that the police did ask if it was possible that JonBenet had run away. Okay. I mean, I get it. I get that they have to ask these things, but yeah, the 6-year-old ran away. The Ramseys sent Burke out of their house at this point to stay with friends to get away from the chaos and sort of all of this thing. Now, according to John, they told Burke that JonBenet had been taken, but they were going to get her back. Dan Schuler, the detective in charge of interrogating Burke, then is, cut in asking how his father sounded at that particular point. And Burke, it's halting. He kind of mumbles through this, but what you do hear and what is on closed caption is, my dad was anxious. He was, I want to say, freaking out is kind of how he put it. It cuts back to John stating that he was completely focused on getting his daughter back, and he could get her back if he stayed focused. The detective goes on to talk about the layout of the house and how it is rather complicated and deceiving from the outside. And while it doesn't look big on the outside, it is incredibly spacious, multi-leveled, and there are a lot of little nook rooms, sort of. It's over 65,000 square feet. There were 3 levels, with another level that was turned into John and Patsy's main, master bedroom. And we are given a really nice 3D computer graphic that kind of explains the layout of the house as you go through it. So it does give you a good idea of kind of how this house was put together, because I think a lot of times I would kind of be confused how things happened. Now the graphic representation then takes you to the basement level to a room called the train room, where Burke used to keep some of his toys, and shows an open and broken window. According to detectives, officers then searched the house. They searched the full house, according to them, and found no signs of JonBenet. This particular detective points out that he didn't go into the house, so this is the lead detective. Until later, this detective went upstairs, looked at JonBenet's room after the crime scene had been found, noticed that the bed was still unmade, and then put crime scene tape over JonBenet's door, noting it as a crime scene at that point. John comes back in to talk about how he was waiting to get the ransom call with expectations of a pickup or drop off to get JonBenet. We're shown a graphic that shows that we've moved forward in time to December 26, 1996 at 8 a.m. We come back to the interview footage of Patsy Ramsey talking about her feelings contemporaneously at that time, feeling guilty, scared, and helpless because her main goal in life is to keep her children safe. And suddenly she didn't know where one of her children was. Now, this interview is again not that infamous interview. So I do make note that she does not look zoned out. Her eyes are not half lidded. And, she makes clear, coherent statements, and she doesn't have any slurring of words. And yes, the dad had 3 children from a previous marriage, and we will get into it in my notes, but Beth, one of his daughters, passed away when JonBenet Ramsey was about a year and a half old in a car accident. So he now has 2 living children with that first wife. Now, I am not a body languageologist, so I did kind of make this interview where she seems to be lucid and with it my baseline, but I'm not, Dr. G or any one of those people. In my opinion, in all, she seems honest and she really believes what she's saying. It doesn't look like it's a game or a PR stunt or, anything that she's trying to sell in this part of the interview. Now, it goes back to the detective asking for the ransom note and then for Mr. Ramsey to give them, the police department, samples of both his writing and Patsy's writing. At 9:45 a.m., this detective took these 2 notepads to the station and gave them to a forgery detective who was also a handwriting examiner to compare with the ransom note. And his name was Jeff Kithart. And he went on to explain his opinion of the handwriting, stating that the expert, thought that Patsy's handwriting matched the ransom note. Then he went on to say that on the notepad there was a heading Mr. and Mrs. That he thought could be indicative of, someone starting the ransom note, but then figuring out that's not the way it wanted to be addressed. However, I saw the picture of that, and if you watch it, you'll see a picture of that. And I don't know if anyone else's moms were type A exclusive right after Christmas. She wrote out what we got and who gave it to you, so you could write thank you notes. And that's kind of what it looked like to me, but I might be bringing my own life into this. I'm not a detective. I'm just telling you what they told me. Now, it also is shown that it looks like the ransom note was written with a notebook or on notebook paper that was from the house. When the handwriting detective showed the responding detective or had that like confab, dramatic music plays and it's like you could have heard a pen drop. Ron Walker is introduced at this point as an FBI agent that the Boulder Police Department informed they had a possible kidnapping. This FBI agent read the demands, but was also confused at the length of the note, stating that typical ransom notes are short and to the point. He also took an issue with $118,000. $118,000 is a low figure for a ransom. He stated you would normally see 200,000, 300,000, but not 118,000. So all of these facts seem to point to this FBI agent to consider this, not a true kidnapping note. Then we move forward in the timeline to 10:15 a.m. John speaks about his torture, his agonizing time waiting for this ransom note. He talks about 10 a.m. coming and going with no time, with no call. And then we just flash forward to 11 a.m. Patsy Ramsey comes back asking she basically was talking to the deputies or the detectives that were already in her home, asking if they had, stopped flights out of Boulder, Colorado. I am getting to that off the top of my head. I don't remember because I was so busy taking notes. I didn't read them afterwards. But I believe it's closer to 12 or noon, right about there. And, the police department said that no, they hadn't done anything. They hadn't, started stopping cars or anything like that. Further, showing that they obviously did not believe that this was a kidnapping. We move to 12 p.m. and Patsy continues to talk about her frustration and the lack of cooperation from the police. In her words, it seemed like they were just standing there. We move to 1 p.m. and the former detective states that John Ramsey, now this is the detective that was in the home, and we're going to see her again at the end of this episode because she claims that John Ramsey, looking through mail and other things, tipped her off that he was absolutely super-de-duper the unaliver. And what happens next, sealed that thought for her. So around 1 o'clock, John is just fidgeting and fiddling in the kitchen, and she just wants to get him out of her hair. He's got too much anxious energy. We already got 60 billion people in the house. Patsy's inconsolable. She's like, if you don't get out of my hair. So she tells him to search the entire house again and see if you find anything unusual. John comes back in the voiceover over stating that he and a friend started to look in the basement, and he said that going and starting in the basement was just logical to him. Being on the main level, the basement was one level down, so he wouldn't logically start at the top, which is he and Patsy's bedroom. So he talks about going into the train room, and he states that he immediately saw the window open and still broken after he had to break into the window to get into the basement that summer. He had assumed that Patsy took care of it. From what I gather from their marriage and other things that I've seen, John basically made the money, and then Patsy was in charge of taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, making sure things got maintenance, doing that. Now, Daily Meanderer, I am so sorry, or Meanderer. Meanderer is, dear Lord, Mo, English. They did claim that they searched, but did not find anything. So he noticed again that the window was still broken. He thought Patsy would probably have taken care of that. And he also noticed that a suitcase that was not generally in the train room was pushed up to the window. And because he had climbed both in the basement, he realized that you would have to have a little step stool or something if you wanted to get out of the basement through that window, but it was possible to go in and out. So he did notice that and note that as strange. John claims that he vocalized this, strangeness to his friend. The friend has not been identified in this documentary, so I don't know if he didn't want to participate or things like that. So John claims he lost his key in the summer, had to get it fixed. So John was unaware, in his words, that it was still broken. John claims the next place they went was the quote-unquote wine cellar, where there was actually no wine stored. It was kind of just this weird annexy room there. John claims that this is when he came upon JonBenet's body. And we do get footage of the actual crime scene. John talks about how JonBenet had tape over her mouth and he pulled it off. Starting the cascade of tampering or contamination, not so much tampering unless you believe the parents did it, but contamination of this particular part of the crime scene. So he removed the tape, and, police have said that he probably removed trace evidence, which he likely did. And we see the piece of tape. He tried to untie her hands and her feet because they were knotted with shoelace cord or some kind of utility cord. He claims that he just picked her up, took her upstairs, and screamed, wanting to get her help, wanting to get her seen. Now, at this point, he does claim, and this comes out later in the episode, that he did not see the ligature on her neck. Now, this could be possible if he was a father finding the not alive body of his daughter. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I would react, honestly, you guys. And I'm not trying to say, I don't believe the parents did it. I'm willing to be, if there's hard evidence, I am willing to, go where the hard evidence shows. If it shows that the family is involved, I'm okay. If it shows that, it was totally a one-armed stranger, I'm totally okay with that. I don't have investment in this. But what I will say is that I have no idea how I would react if I came across one of my children passed away. I don't know that I could stop myself from holding my baby and just rocking back and forth. So that's where I come with this, kind of thought. Now, the detective that was in the house did look for a pulse and unfortunately had to tell John that, JonBenet was dead. Patsy Ramsey comes back from another old interview, and her eyes are closed. It does seem like she's reliving that moment. She explains that one of her friends, like one of the 84 people that were there apparently having a JonBenet is missing cleaning party for some damn reason. I have no idea, y'all, why she called like everybody in this neighborhood. But Patsy comes back, and you can tell by her face that she is reliving this moment. And one of her friends stopped her from going in the room. So I don't know that Patsy ever saw her at that time. And I will say this is, old footage of her and John. And I did notice that John did lean into her and wrap his arm, kind of move his arm to maybe put his arm on her leg or something. They didn't show like the legs, so I'm just assuming, unless, he got some thrills doing the, a little bit of a third base sort of move on CNN. But I'm assuming that, he put his hand on her, leg to give her comfort. And that did strike me as, nice. Again, I kind of am a Pollyanna, but with a really cynical soul too. So don't ask me. I don't know. Now, Patsy gets visibly choked up. I mean, her voice is breaking. She has to whisper the words, "She's gone." Now, this is, again, a much more subdued reaction from that first interview where she is, I don't know what they gave this lady, but she is like, I mean, you can tell she is in horrific emotional pain, but she is high as balls, all right? High as balls. In that really first, famous interview. So then we skip forward to 11:12 p.m. and we go back to Detective Jeff, the handwriting expert, getting the news that JonBenet's body has been found, and detectives were at the house. They notified dispatch, and basically he states at that point, I knew it. They killed her. They killed their kid, is what this detective says. So the police are already starting out with a firm belief that the parents did this, which may or may not, as we can see from right now, actually have hindered the case, because they went in with a preconceived notion, and whether or not the evidence said anything different, and I get it. it looks really super sus, all the sus. The ransom note, the parents, they seem to be having genuine emotions, but the entire situation seems sus. So then we're introduced to one of a bevy of the parasitical terrorist people that are the media. And I say this because we are going to talk about some comments that were made about JonBenet by some media people that maybe need to go back and, I don't know, apologize at some point, because they were talking about a flippin' 6-year-old. I get you may not agree with the pageant thing, and I'll get there. This rant is coming. But I have a couple things to say to the media, because if we don't hate the media enough. And I was shocked in this episode realizing that the media was just as parasitic, just as Nancy Grace, just as awful. They've always been awful. They have always freaking been awful. And I guess at 12, I was not mature enough to realize that the media has always been flippin' awful. They've always, latched on like vampire lamprey eels, onto a tragedy to suck it dry, regardless of whether they're, coming into this. True, Celestial Force, true. Duncan, I have never been so happy that Geraldo never found Hoffa. Like, you know what? I kind of hope that the mob moved Hoffa just to make Geraldo look like a douche. I mean, that's what I would do if I was a mob boss, which is reason number 11D12. I'm not a mob boss. So we are introduced to Paula Woodward. She is an investigative reporter for a local news station, and she talks about how she was called in. Again, you guys have to remember this is Christmas. She got information that there was a, thing going on, and Paula comes in with some hearsay evidence. Paula says that according to her unnamed sources, that when the investigators learned that JonBenet was not alive, someone hissed, "The parents did it. I knew they killed their daughter." So again, as I said, we do not hate the media enough. It started way back when. Probably. I need some luminol for reasons, and I have to go to a hotel soon, so for reasons. So this hearsay quote does kind of poison the well, and I did start to wonder if the, docuseries wanted me to be upset with the parents. Now John Ramsey comes back and states that they were quickly escorted from the house and they went to stay at a friend's home. John claims that they were both in shock. And we go back to Burke's interrogation, the interview stating they get to the part and the counselor asks Burke, "Well, what did you feel when you were told that they found JonBenet?" And he kind of mumbles, but then he innocently says, like, "Oh, I was happy we found her. I was going to go, tell her something." But then it does kind of change, because he said, "Well, how did you feel when you learned that she was in heaven?" He's like, "I cried. I was sad." So whether you believe that Burke, completely brained his sister and the parents did all of this, this is what he said in the interview. Now, I do like that this episode changes points of view, but it is a bit schizophrenic. It has like little spots. So you have Paula Woodward, talking, and then you have, someone else talking. And so you do get this linear progression of the day, but it also is so, full of different perspectives that you really do, feel maybe a little discombobulated, or at least I did. Let's see here. Then we move to December 26th, 1996, 9 p.m., and we go to kind of local reporting of this case. We do see a body bag of JonBenet coming out, and you do start getting rumblings that the media is not happy with the police because basically all they were told is the age of the victim, the sex of the victim, and that she was found in the home. So it does start to go, where you see this sort of adversarial relationship start forming between the Boulder Police Department and the vampirish, soul-sucking media of all kinds. Allegedly media. No, actually media. You just have dropped the ball so many times. I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Then we're introduced to Charlie Brennan, another investigative reporter for Rocky Mountain News, and he starts talking about investigative reporters like they know that this is a big story. They know that this is going to be huge. So you go from local reporting to the sea of C-SPAN, NBC, ABC, Fox TV. You have just the barrage of cameras outside of the Ramsey's house. And you do kind of see this. There are a lot of voiceovers, just kind of little snippets of how big this case became. There were, 60 Minutes, Dateline, Nightlife, just all the things. So I do like that we get kind of a show that this was both locally incredibly, saturated with media coverage, but also, nationally and even globally. So then we're introduced to Julie Hayden, investigative reporter for KMGH Denver. Julie talks about starting to look into who are the Ramseys. John Ramsey, owner of this very lucrative graphics company, and how friends of John and Patsy Ramsey wouldn't talk to the media. We get another reporter, Carolyn McKinney, investigative reporter from Fox News, talking about how there was really very little dissemination of information coming from the police department. The episode kind of takes a break here. So then we kind of go back to how John and Patsy met. And we're shown a sort of recorded Christmas video card from when JonBenet was 4 and Burke was 7, and with Patsy and both of the kids in front of the Christmas tree, the matching sweaters, the whole shtick. Then comes one of John Ramsey's older adult children, John Andrew Ramsey, JonBenet's older brother from John's first marriage. John kind of expresses kind of the weird dichotomy his life and his family's, timeline is. That before that Christmas, they were a normal family. Sure, they were blended. Sure, there were, things, the normal friction that you have in families. But after that Christmas day, they were broken. It just has affected that family's trajectory from that time. He talks about when JonBenet was born. She was the 5th of John's children. Burke was 10 years younger than John, and JonBenet was 13 years younger. And John had these 2 children in his second marriage. And we do get to see, and to me it was heartbreaking, we got to see a lot of montages of a happier time. Christmas 1994, JonBenet and Burke going sledding down a hill with the requisite, tumble after. Then, these were all taken by Melinda Ramsey. John talks about how he met Patsy through friends. He was divorced, he was single, but there was quite a bit of an age gap between John and Patsy, and he didn't really want to invest in a relationship that he thought was just not going to be worthwhile. But Patsy impressed him, he fell in love and they were engaged and got married. We get to see photos from their early life. John describes himself as an independent entrepreneur, and my notes, end quote, say, he does something with computers, probably Harry Potter magic that I'm not going to figure out, end quote, from my notes. He just had a lucrative merger with several other companies and he was quite successful. They had moved from Atlanta to Boulder with intentions of moving back to Atlanta at some point. John states that while this was more money than he ever thought he would ever make, he was by no means a millionaire or a billionaire. Now, it does go to the tragedy of 1992, John losing his daughter from his first marriage, Beth, when she was killed in an automobile accident. John Andrew Ramsey talks about that devastation and the loss the family experienced when they lost Beth. Now, then we get a voiceover from Patsy Ramsey because at this time, JonBenet was about a year and a half old when they lost John's daughter, Beth. Patsy Ramsey talks about how, and I can see this makes sense to me, but it might not. It was worded oddly, and it puts a lot of onus on JonBenet to heal things that aren't hers to heal, but I get what she's trying to say. She said that it was like JonBenet knew that we were sad, that we were grieving, and she would come and she would cuddle us, and she gave us a reason to go on. She was always there being the sweetest child, taking care of us and, comforting us. Again, I'm not sure how much I buy into, your younger child taking or understanding this in a complex way. But I get the sentiment, and I'll do a personal story so I can kind of tell you how I get this. Back when youngest most feral was a wee one, maybe 2 or 3 weeks old, my mother-in-law tragically lost her very best friend in the world, and her very best friend, her sister. They lived in the same town. They went to do everything together. They were constantly going out and doing things. And this was a super close relationship. And she suddenly lost her sister and her brother-in-law in a car accident. And we went up there. We went to the funeral. And I was just holding youngest most feral, making sure he didn't make a heathen noise in the church. And I could see my mother-in-law was losing it. There is something very final when they close that casket. And I just, handed her youngest most feral. And for the first time in his life, he was silent and quiet. Or maybe for the last time in his life. I don't know. I love my youngest most feral son, but he is about 12 bottles of Twitter patient in a 1-pound bag. He has all the energy. But I can tell you, just holding on to him and rocking him, she told me later that was probably the greatest piece she could have had that day. And I felt bad because I hadn't done anything more than just, I'm not good with hugging. I'm not good with I'm not a big hugger, so I tend to pat people, which is really awkward because then I just I'm sorry, I don't know what to do here, and I don't know how to human this. So I just figured, holding youngest most feral always calmed me down. Maybe it would help her. And she said that really helped. So while I don't agree that you should ever put the onus on a child to fix your problems to make you feel better as an adult, I do get what she's trying to say. Perhaps a little bit more with the onus on JonBenet. Again, her daughter passed. Whatever you feel about her, yes, we tend to give near mystical qualities or remember our loved ones who have passed with maybe rose-colored glasses and give them, the ability to intuit things at 1.5 years old. Then we fast forward a little bit to 1993 in the Ramsey family history, detailing Patsy's first fight with ovarian cancer. Now, according to John, Patsy had put off going to a hospital for months. Her stomach was visibly distended, and it wasn't until her mother kind of came in and said, Lady, if you don't get your behind to the emergency room, we are going to have words. So Patsy went, they did an x-ray, a scan, and found out that it was ovarian cancer. We see, vignettes, little videos of Patsy with short or no hair or a pixie cut. And Patsy does a voiceover, kind of just sharing some different moments of JonBenet coming to her when she was doing chemotherapy, touching all the bags, squishing them, being a general kid. And I will say that this, you know, documentary has given me more of a slice of who JonBenet was, because I hate remembering her as this, lifeless little girl taken away in a body bag. If anything, it is more heartbreaking that we get a glimpse of, who she was. She seemed like a hammy, bright, outgoing girl just from the stories that were told. You know, John explains that, Patsy, after a year, was cancer free and in remission, and how Patsy, according to him, was not going to look this gift of life, not going to let it take it for granted at this point. Patsy, we go back to footage of Patsy in another interview talking about how her children are her motivation to stay alive, because no one was going to raise them like she wanted to raise them. She was going to do the best that she could to be the best mom. We go back to then Carol McKinney, the investigative reporter, who comes on and she talks about the autopsy report, saying quite frankly that anyone who wants to get involved in this case, anyone who wants to research this case, really needs to look at the autopsy report. Now, whoever unalived JonBenet took white, they called it Olsen cord, and tied her wrists together with the same cord and used that cord to then make a garrote. Now, it was explained by another person, I believe the FBI agent, that a garrote is more of a control mechanism than a life-ending mechanism. Again, I don't watch enough true crime, which is weird to not know this, because I usually think I've watched all the true crime. So he said in his experience that a garrote is more often used to control a victim, not necessarily as the manner of death. The person that is speaking is John St. Augustine, retired commander sheriff of the El Paso County of El Paso, Colorado, and he's the one that's giving his opinion about the garrote. He states that you can apply pressure on the neck, then releasing it, excuse me, multiple times. We get to what the garrote was constructed with: the stick of a paintbrush with the brush or the bristle part left in the kind of supply caddy that she had, and the stick portion was used as the garrote. Patsy's paint supplies were stored in the basement, and it looks like, according to him, that there were some complexity in the manufacture of the garrote. The notes were not, something that would be a common sort of, bunny ears over under that way. These were more complex knots, according to him. Now, this was not tied by someone that knew how a garrote was made, in his opinion. Now, Bob Whitston, the first detective that we were introduced to, believes that JonBenet was alive when this garrote was placed because of the blonde hairs contained within the knot. So as someone was putting this on, the knots were made and it got some of her hair. Now, they do show a picture of this little innocent baby's neck, and you can tell that the garrote is dug deep into her throat. It has indented, it is embedded, and it's a hard picture to look at. Now, this does bring a little bit of shade from the, John finding the body. How did he? Because he claims that he did not see this. Now, again, I go back to if I found my baby not alive, I don't know that I would see anything but my child. I doubt that I would be able to tell you any details other than the weight of him in them in my arms, the way I rocked back and forth, their smell. I don't know that I would be able to tell you anything more than that. So that's where I do give grace for that. Now, Carol McKinney hops back in to state that everyone initially thought that the garrote was the mechanism of death. However, if you read the autopsy report, her head and brain, basically she had an 8-inch crack to her skull, with part of the skull actually indented into that. Now, detectives did believe that there were 2 items that could have caused this injury to JonBenet in the home. One was the Ramsey's baseball bat found outside the Ramsey's home, and we get to see that with an evidence tag along with a mag light flashlight, and we also see that with an evidence tag. Now, according to the Boulder County Police, no physical evidence such as trace evidence, blood, spatter, any sort of DNA were found on either the flashlight or the bat. The coroner that did the autopsy report on JonBenet stated that there were 2 reasons or 2 contributors to what made JonBenet die. Now, either it was strangulation from the garrote or cranial cerebral trauma. And the coroner said that they were both fairly contemporaneous to each other. So they were not sure, he was not sure which happened first. He did note that the skull fracture did have blood in it, so it did indicate that her heart was beating. And I'm not a doctorologist, so I don't know how long, if you are given a very forcible neck hug, so should we say, YouTube, you unrelenting, miserable bastards. Actually, I'm going to rant about this for 5 seconds. Hey, YouTube, what's great is that you let your authoritative media, partners say all the words that I can't say as an independent person to really explain the depth and gravity of these crimes. No, I have to make up stupid creoles and euphemisms so that you guys don't demonetize me, but you're A-okay with CNN, NBC, ABC, posting all of the crime footage I have to blur out. Like, seriously. This takes away from something when all of us creators have to use these stupid words instead of the real words that this child was, it looks like, possibly tortured and killed in the most terrible way, and I have to make up stupid words so that you don't demonetize me. This is just dumb. Now, there were also microscopic fibers that were found in the paintbrush handle that also were found in her private area. So it was, posited that she was SA'd by the paintbrush. Now, Paula Woodard comes back in. She is another investigative, reporter that said that once it came out what had happened to JonBenet, people were livid. The entire country wanted blood. The media had started this frenzy, and now we were looking for the monster. And then we go to a bunch of things, and we've got another rant incoming. Sorry, guys, I'm really ranty. But we get everyone from CNN, Dateline, Geraldo, Inside Edition, hard copy, all of the old ones, but good ones, but dead ones. We've got all of them. We even have Larry King. Is Larry King still alive, or is he a skeleton now? I don't remember, but I haven't seen him for a while. But I was never a big Larry King fan. He was kind of before my time. And I'm nerdy, but I'm not going to watch Larry King as a 12-year-old. But we have everyone pontificating on the beauty pageants. The media took the beauty pageant angle and ran with it. There was, of course, plenty of pictures, headshots, glossies, all these things that you could take, and the media ran with it. We got to see, pictures of JonBenet in her, what I can only call a showgirl outfit, a cowgirl outfit, her little equestrian outfit, and then her 90s workout with a leotard and leggings thing. And we get to hear everyone pontificate about it. And again, it was a bit heartbreaking to see again a lively girl alive. And I get the desire to find a monster once you've seen this beautiful little girl strutting her stuff, whether you agree with it or not. Alive, happy, and just living in a beautiful smile. And yes, it's all artificial. I get that. But I get you see this beautiful girl living life, and then you see this body bag coming out, and you want a monster. And the monster was beauty pageants. The parents were demons. We got every single hot take. Opinions that she looked older than her age, that it was sexualizing young girls, that we got all the panel. Apparently this chick who apparently died before The View came out, and I didn't get a chance to catch her name or I'd call her out on it, but she made the quote that she looked like a miniature hooker, a Jezebel. Bridget, I have a couple ideas, but they're not fully formed enough. There isn't enough evidence for me to go truly this or truly that. So I'm trying to keep an open mind. We'll get to it, but there is a bombshell that the DNA is not a match. The DNA that they found on the underpants and under JonBenet's fingernails were not a match to Burke, John, Patsy, or anyone in the family. And the Boulder police withheld that information from both the press and the parents for about 4 months. But I don't believe there's been further genetic testing beyond that. This is, of course, state-of-the-art 1996 technology. So I do wonder if there is a possibility that we could test that again or do ancestral DNA. It might be a red herring, but it might not be. And I don't understand the reluctance to test this DNA now that we have, obviously advanced technology. But let me get back to Miss Krabappel, squawking on live-ass television, calling a 6-year-old a hooker. Ma'am, I am sorry that life has treated you bad, but I don't know what the hell happened to your soul that you would call a deceased 6-year-old, whether you agree with pageants or not, a prostitute. You absolute heartless monster. And again, we just don't hate the media enough. Now, I get it. I did put a little note on here. I get that beauty pageants are not everyone's jam, but how dare you call a deceased 6-year-old a hooker? It seems very much like the media then and now want a monster or an injustice or some casual reason to blame the victim. The Ramseys were judged in the media as delinquent and sexualizing perverted parents. The entire media was there to judge the Ramseys on the fact that JonBenet was in these pageants. And then we cut to JonBenet and Patsy in a later interview talking about the pageants. Patsy and John both vehemently denied that they sexualized their daughter, and they talk about these condemnations being in the eye of the beholder. Patsy is, I'm going to say, rather defensive objectively, but I can understand if the entire world is throwing you shade for a hobby that you and your daughter did. Look, I don't get lacrosse. It confuses the ever-living hell out of me. I don't get most sports, but I would never tell a parent that, oh, well, he just looked like a dumb jock. No, that's your child. That's their interest. I could never. But it's okay to talk about pageants, not okay to talk about sports. Are we going to talk about, modeling, or are we going to talk about putting your child as a child actor? Because I think we could talk could we talk about sending your child to Diddy's house? I mean, there are a lot of stones out there. I don't know that I would throw one, media, with all the shenanigans you have in your back pocket. And I'm talking mostly to British media. I mean, you cannot throw a stone at the BBC without a Gary Sparkles coming out, or Gary Glitter. Anywho, there are just a lot of PDF files that have come out of the BBC media lately, or at least in the last 50 years. Now, like I said, Patsy is rather defensive at this, and we get to see more, footage of JonBenet just doing her stuff at these beauty pageants. Both John and Patsy state, because there was conjecture that the Ramseys had invited this in. The Ramseys had invited this evil into their midst by letting their daughter do beauty pageants, and somehow she attracted, the gaze of a PDF file, as it were. And Patsy does speak to this in the interview, stating that, there were generally 20 to 30 people, adult people in audience in the pageants, and they were mostly parents or, coaches of these kids. They rarely saw any outside people. In fact, that it would be noticed that, there were outside figures coming in and doing weird, creepy stuff like just staring and breathing heavy. I mean, imagine pageant moms finding a weirdo. You take that energy. I have seen Toddlers and Tiara. You do not want to get one of these feral pageant moms pissed off at you. No, you do not. She will take a can of Aquanet and a lighter and just shh. Do not test. Now, it goes back into Patsy's background, how she was a beauty queen in college and did pageants in West Virginia. Patsy claims that JonBenet asked to do pageants, and John does state that Patsy was worried. She had been told that even though her cancer was in remission, there was a possibility it could come back. And she was anxious. She had had a scare in her life. She nearly lost her life. And she was worried that she wouldn't be around for when JonBenet was older. Now, this is according to John. Take this with a pound of salt if you want. So she wanted to experience these things, with her daughter that she might not be able to. And that way, the way they bonded was pageants. Now, I will tell you that in some parts of the South, this is just a way of life. This is normal. In fact, this is something that moms and daughters do. Now, I am never been more thankful to be taken to the land of corn and nothingness that is Indiana, because my awkward behind in a tutu as a child, well, let's just say my mom would never be bringing home any trophies other than a participation one, because I'd probably want to do stand-up comedy for my talent instead of dancing because I have no rhythm. We then jump forward and back into the timeline, and we are on December 26, 1996, 3 days after the murder. The police have come under intense scrutiny for the investigation. Rather quickly, you can hear live news coverage, snippets from the time, and after only 3 days, the media is upset. They are not getting access to information. They are not getting interviews. They are not being told what's going on in this case. The media starts lashing out, and it requires media conferences with Leslie Durgan, the mayor of Boulder, to kind of calm the waters, and they have no chill for her. Now, Boulder police did not have a track record of handling this case, a case of this magnitude. Charlie Brennan, an investigative reporter for the Rocky Mountain News, states that this was a kind of a conundrum for the Boulder police. They didn't have experience. There had been no homicides in the year leading up to JonBenet's murder, and she was the only homicide for that year. So he comments, this is where doubts start to, creep up. Will the Boulder Police Department be able to handle this? Lack of experience procedurally caused a lot of crime scene contamination. The officers should have moved all of those people out of the house and secured the house, according to the FBI agent that was currently here. He was talked to earlier. Then we cut to Tom Kobe, Boulder Police Chief, to explain why the standard operating procedures for a crime scene wasn't covered. He talks about the largeness of the house, making that excuse as to why police officers didn't find JonBenet earlier in the morning. But he basically excuses it away, like, it's a large house, it's confuserating, we did our best, sort of thing. One of the police officers, didn't open the door, didn't check all the rooms. So there were really a lot of questions from the jump start of this. People asked why it wasn't the whole house wasn't declared a crime scene. Mo in the deep end, do you feel cases like this, Jacob Wetterling, Adam Walsh, etc., have evolved us into a more guarded parents? Yes and no. I think that we are more aware because the media, because true crime, a lot of the monstrous things that can happen to our kids. I think that we've become a society that looks directly at some of the dangers to our children, some of these people that have unholy desires for our children. And then we also have to contend with now our children being sucked into social media things where they might get, blackmailed into nudes and possibly end their life like one teenager did, or try a Tide Bowl challenge or things like that. So there are so many things that we're worried about that I do feel like those carefree summers where I would just walk around in my latchkey self, just like wandering, doing whatever, playing in my neighborhood, going around talking to neighbors, accidentally picking neighbors' flowers, to which I did have to apologize. I am sorry. Your flowers were beautiful until I picked them for my mom, which made it a gift, and I really don't think I should have been punished, but, well, I litigated that already and lost, and there are no appeals in the court of mom. But I feel like we are more aware, and maybe that does make us a little more guarded. But maybe it also reminds us to be incredibly mindful of the short time that we have these precious kids in our lives, that every day is a blessing. And, it could all end in a minute. And not to get stuck in that, it'll all end in a minute, but realize and be grateful for every moment, even when they're annoying the ever-living Schnell out of you, because you'll remember this, and when they're a fully grown human, they'll come back and they'll see you and they'll thank you for, being an okay parent. That's all of our hopes. And we can either focus on the things that terrify us, or we can focus on, the opportunity and the blessing. We don't have to be naive Pollyannas. It's not like we're going to send our kids outside into traffic to play. But we can give them the skills. We can teach them to be aware, to notice things, to trust their gut instinct. I think if every parent told their child, if you feel like something is off, don't ignore that feeling. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be, it's not going to make you a bad person if something really bothers you about getting in that person's car. Or if something really bothers you about the situation that you're in and you can't put a feeling to it, that's your gut telling you something is wrong, and to listen to that. And this is more directed to our girls, but I know that we kind of teach our girls to be agreeable, to kind of, look, don't rock the boat, don't assume that people have bad intentions. Don't do that. When you get those gut feelings, though, It's not something bad. You don't have to explain it away as internalized istophobia. It might be that you are picking up on something that is not kosher going on. And I wish we told people that more often. And again, you don't have to be a butthead about it. You can just say, I'm not feeling this. But listen to those. I don't know. I think half a dozen of one, half and six of the other. If that answers anything, Celestial Force, this is my general problem. I tend to see things from a bajillion different perspectives, and then it's very hard for me to settle on one kind of definitive answer because I can see multiple sides of it. So I hope that answered some of it. Now, the documentary then goes into how people were washing dishes, getting coffee, vacuuming, like destroying the hell out of this crime scene as these detectives who were, supposed to be just guarding the house, were watching. Now, Bob Whitson, the lead detective, comes in to say that the reason the house was not cleared is because they thought it was a legitimate kidnapping. There are legitimate questions about how the police did not find the body, but the father did from the media. And the media basically go into how moving JonBenet's body destroyed a lot of, delicate crime scene investigation. Trace evidence, that kind of thing. The fact that he pulled duct tape, there could have been something on there. The fact that he jostled the blanket, that kind of thing. And we have no idea what was lost because of that. Now, the chief, Kobe, comes back and says that the crime scene was not contaminated enough that they wouldn't be able to find evidence to bring the killer to justice. So now we're moving into the period of suspicions falling on John and Pat Ramsey. The suspicion was based on a variety of things, and unfortunately, these were things that the media would not know of until later because of the lack of communication. Linda Art is another reporter, and she had an interview with Patsy Ramsey and John Ramsey, and she talks about so Linda Art, I'm sorry, she is not a reporter. I have this wrong in my notes. Linda Art is the detective that was there that told John to get out of her face, like go do something, get away. You are making me Twitter pated with your anxiousness. And she had a Diane Sawyer interview, so I think Dateline or wherever Diane Sawyer came from, where she's sitting there and you can tell this is 1999, and she talks about when John brought JonBenet up and he looked at her. She said that she subconsciously counted the freedom seeds in her force multiplier, knowing she had 18, and she felt that him looking at her, saying he had found his daughter, was the confession of the killer. She also uses as her evidence that John Ramsey was the unaliver, that he was looking through mail upstairs while he was, just kind of agitatedly walking around fiddling with stuff. She felt that him looking at the mail, looking through the mail, which John Ramsey counters was because he was looking for maybe another ransom note. But this was the clue that she said, locked her into this. That he was looking at mail, and then he looked at her when he brought JonBenet up, and that's when she said, in her opinion, she was face to face with an unaliver. Now, that seems like fairly flimsy to me. I don't understand how looking through mail, being generally agitated and just kind of fiddle farting with stuff, like through the morning waiting for a ransom call, allegedly, equals he's the unaliver because reasons. And she does a lot of she talks about how John beelined to the basement, in her opinion. She felt like it was odd that he would go to the basement first when they're on the main level and the basement's one level below them. If you search the whole house, my brain, I would start at the basement. Not gonna lie. So that doesn't really hold water for me, but it seemed to hold a lot of water to her. John does state in a voiceover that, in his opinion, the most logical place to start was the basement because it was the easiest access to the house for an or for an outsider to get into his home. Now, again, we just get a lot of feelings about her saying that, I was terrified, I was Twitter pated. And this is an ABC News interview from September 17th, 1999. So make of that what you will. But it did seem to be just a reason for the media to bring the case up again and to squeeze a little more out of this story. John goes on to talk about, we are kind of in the next day in the timeline, talks about, not being able to do anything the next day. He could barely function. And apparently, while he was in the midst of barely functioning, taking care of his just almost catatonic Patsy because they had given her something for the situation, he received a call from an employee basically stating, you need to get a good defense attorney, like the best damn defense attorney you can get your hands on, because they are targeting you. You are under suspicion. Now, John states that this turn of events shocked him, that he had never imagined that the police would put him and Patsy in the lime, So then we jump to December 30th, 5 days after the murder. The media is reporting how John and Patsy have hired defense attorneys. Now, many of the media are dumb, and again, we do not hate them enough because they make a big deal about the fact that they hired attorneys. Now, those of us who watch true crime interrogations and all of the trials know that before we talk to the popo, what do? We do one thing. We get a lawyer, because a lawyer is going to make sure that the cops, whose only job is to get a conviction, don't get one, or at least don't pin one on you. So while the media makes a big daggone deal of the fact that they got lawyers, as I wrote, the media is reporting about how John and Patsy hired defense attorneys. Many of the media reporters kind of give their 2 cents about how this is weird and that the Ramseys hired defense attorneys. However, those of us laytubers and lawtubers or adjacent YouTubers understand that if there is a possibility of you being, a murder suspect, you do not talk to the police without a lawyer. There is no reason to talk to the police without a lawyer. Police are only looking for a confession or to put you as the suspect. The media made a big deal about defense attorneys hired by the Ramseys, and the attacks are, fairly understandable and generic, but anyone who knows the justice system knows that you do not talk to the police without a lawyer. However, much hay was made in the media. This was juicy. This was gossip. They are not talking to the police. They are not cooperating. Well, why in the hell wouldn't you talk to the police if your child was missing? Well, heaven's sake, why not cooperate? It's your child. There was just all of the hemming and hawing from the usual suspects, and I'm sure Nancy Grace Ursula was there. Now, John talks about how they had nothing to hide, but, people encouraged him to get a defense attorney because they understood how the legal system works. And John talks about, giving hair, blood, writing samples, whatever the police wanted through their attorneys. We go then to the funeral of JonBenet. JonBenet was buried next to her older sister, Beth. And of course, it was all televised because America could not get enough of this case. And you get to see this heartbreakingly small little casket, just adorned with flowers. And John narrates this particular scene and says he would have been happy to die. He just wanted both of his children back. One of the, kind of snippet reporters talks about how the Ramseys released press releases instead of talking to the media, using this as more fodder to call them all the guilty. When they realize, just like the police, the media is only looking to, get the juiciest angle on this story. They're not interested in the truth. They're interested in what sells. And what sells is evil pageant parents living through their daughter and, unaliving them in a fit of rage or fit of something because they really didn't have an idea of why JonBenet was unalived at that point. And this particular episode doesn't go into this. So it does flash forward to the Ramseys' friends encouraging them to do an interview. And this is the infamous first interview right after the death of JonBenet. You can tell that Patsy is heavily medicated and very emotional. John looks hollowed out, and it's not so much in his face. It's not like he's lost a lot of weight, but his eyes are dull. His expression is dull. He just looks completely hollowed out. And he tries to help Patsy, but Patsy is kind of doing one of these. And you can tell that this was maybe too soon to do this, but obviously they needed to counteract and they were encouraged to get their story out there. I'm not a body languageologist. I am not bald, nor do I star on the behavior panel. But what I saw were two parents dealing with this tragedy the best way they knew how, in my opinion. There were many attacks made on the Ramseys because they were willing to talk to the media, but not the police. Patsy seemed incredibly overwhelmed and emotional. She's slurring her words. Her eyes are half lidded. She looks very out of it. And I think that's completely understandable. This is where we get the title of our episode when Patsy's says, "Keep your babies close. There's someone out there." And she's crying. I mean, this woman just looks torn apart. This isn't, to me, the fake crying of Susan Smith or Diane Downs. This woman looks devastated. Now, the media, of course, being the vultures that they are, go out to the local community of Boulder, Colorado, and found people that were deeply scornful of Patsy and John's statement that a killer is on the loose. The mayor said, there is no killer on the loose. Like, Boulder is safe. These Ramsey people don't know what they're talking about. So we get different community reactions to the interview, but it does seem odd that they only picked two people in this entire town. So I think that, and this is my opinion only, that the news only showed the interviews where people were deeply skeptical because it sells. It sells. We have a class story here. We have a story that involves rich people that believe they're above the law. We have a story of a mom living her life through a pageant daughter. I mean, there are so many angles for the media to take this. It is, have a good day, Gabby. Then we go to, so we do get different media reactions from this, but it does seem to be deeply scornful, deeply judgmental, and accusatory. Now we go to January 5th, 1997, 10 days after the murder, and we get some local media coverage covering John and Patsy's return to Boulder, Colorado. They attend church, and the media kind of labels this and states that this is a PR press stunt, like they're going to church as a stunt. And that when they were leaving the church, unbeknownst to the media, who stated that this was all orchestrated by the PR people of John and Patsy Ramsey, the pastor or the priest, I don't know what denomination or flavor they were, asked everyone of the parishioners to line the sidewalk as the Ramseys came out to show their support. But the media, basically framed this as John and Patsy making a big spectacle of themselves. We jump to January 15th, 1997, 20 days after the event. Boulder, Colorado Police Department comes out with DNA testing that was touted by the media as being the key to unlocking the case. Both sides appeared to be anxious to get the results of this DNA test to either firmly put the family in the bullseye of the suspect or to give them a different lead in this case, because they really did not have any other leads other than it was the family. The DNA was taken under JonBenet's fingernails, both right and left hand, and from her underpants. They compared the profiles of the entire Ramsey family, so John, Patsy, and Burke, and a litany of people that were close to the family. And there was no DNA match from any of those people. JonBenet comes in and says, we want to test the data. There was unidentified DNA, which excludes, myself, Patsy, and Burke. The police were told this in January, so they got this information back in January of that year, but kept it secret from both the district attorney and the media for months. The police did not report to the media what the DNA test revealed. What the CBI test results of the DNA were not released even to the DA. And we're coming to the conclusion of this episode. I'm pretty sure we're going to be on a cliffhanger now. And it does seem that was kind of the cliffhanger that they wanted to end on. So who was the DNA from this foreign person? According to the FBI agent, there was no innocent explanation as to how this foreign DNA got on JonBenet Ramsey. So at the end of this episode, we're left wondering, whose DNA was under JonBenet's fingernails and on her underpants. And on the whole, while I don't think that the episode treads any new ground, I do think it gives a good perspective of something that we see all too often in these particular cases, these high-profile cases. We see an absolute lack of journalistic integrity. We see, the media going for the biggest story, for the most salacious details, regardless of the validity of them. We have no greater example than Nancy Grace going to the Delphi trial, sitting in there for about an hour and parroting every single prosecutorial point. This woman didn't deeply research the case. She went in there to get a salacious and juicy headline and do her, Southern prosecutor voice and with her eyebrows and do one of these things. I mean, I don't know how her face stays like that or her eyebrows stay up like that, but whatever duct tape that they use, I'm sure. Okay, I have to stop just ad hominem attacks on Nancy Grace, although it is a talent of mine and I will put it on my LinkedIn at some point. So that is kind of my thoughts on the docudrama thus far. I will say that it's hooked me in. I do like seeing the perspective of the parents, of all of the media, and it really does show that this media sensationalism, this rush to judge in the media first and then screw the court later if we're, not going to make anything happen kind of thing, I guess I was immune to it, or I didn't notice it as much when I was 12, but going through this, again, looking at all of the media that they've compiled, I realize how dirty and how gross, the media has been. And I think I will add a special kind of asterisk here that is new in our cases now. I don't know what hybrid blend I am of true crimer, laytuber, whatever it is, but I feel like some YouTubers, and I'm not going to name names, rush to the sensational headline. They be damned whether they are speculating or actually giving you an honest scoop. And they don't tell you if they're speculating. They don't say, hey, we don't really have any information to back this up. This is my opinion. No, we have people that just come out with hot takes and, want to have the first video about this or the first hot take on this. And they haven't read the case file. They don't know anything. They didn't watch the trial. And they repeat whatever, CNN told them or whatever mainstream media. It is just, I am a deeply silly person. I try not to take things too very seriously, but conversely, I feel a deep responsibility when I am on here to not lead you guys in the wrong direction, to clearly delineate where I have an opinion and where something is hard fact and it comes from documents I can show you. And I try to be really good with this because I know that there is a possibility that one day one of my videos could land in front of, one of the victim's family members or one of, say a survivor's, eyeballs. And what I don't want to ever happen is to have my voice be one that, prematurely condemns someone. And I know that's a little hypocritical when I rag immensely on Sarah Boone, but she was all the guilty. I mean, when you film a snuff film, I kind of feel like I'm okay to make fun of you. But I do wish that all YouTubers who are in this space would maybe watch this, docudrama and see how incredibly feral, rabid, and just soulless the media is, and take steps so we, the new media, or whatever we want to call ourselves, don't fall into the same trap. That's just my opinion. I am kind of sad, though, that this wig is way too red to be a Daria wig, because I have the glasses. I love that I'm pre-planning Halloween already, but I'm like, I have the Daria glasses. I am ready to go. I hope you guys have a great night. There will not be nightly newsy news tonight. I'm going to watch the next episode and type, okay, so this is a brag on Mr. Mo. He got me when I first started this. I want to say it's Dragonfire, but it's basically a writing program where I can just talk and allegedly use, periods and grammar to write out my notes. So it's really nice to be able to listen in my earbud and dictate exactly what I'm feeling through my microphone, and then it shows up in this wonderful Word document. So there you go. That is the notes that I took. That was nearly 19 pages of notes because I am a compulsive note taker. I hope you enjoyed this. I do like, this might be something I do more of in the future. I might go to the Menendez brothers. It's my weird dragon speech. Thank you, Wolfram. I know it's not a bad dragon. But I may do more of these. These are fairly simple for me to just listen and write notes on, and I would have watched them anyway, so this may be something that I definitely add to my rotation. Now I'm going to go check on my turkey and make sure it's thawing the way it should, because it is something that I get... yeah, it's crazy. Have a lovely day, and let me see who is live, and I will send you over there. I am going to pop on real quick on Nick's channel. He has been covering the YSL case for forever. If you watch The Sandlot, you know that quote. So he is on Verdict Watch. Let's see if he's still on Verdict Watch. And it would be lovely if you guys go over there, give some support. It has been a grueling case, and I hope that he gets, all the support for doing all of this stuff, and not just the people that, hopped on the case as it was closing. So I will see you guys in a little bit. I'm going to hop over there after I make sure that it is strangely and creepily quiet. So I'm going to go make sure that my house isn't burning down before I go visit with Nick. I will see you guys in just a little bit. Thank you so much for joining, and have a lovely day. Bye, you guys.